Hey guys, welcome back. I apologize for the massive gap in my videos. I've been super busy the last couple weeks. However, after those long couple weeks, we've done a lot. We've leveled as fast as we could using mini specs. We've done countless normals, heroics, and even raid testing multiple times. So now that it's all said and done, I want to do a few videos regarding the mini specs that us as warlocks can choose from. All right. The first one is strictly about leveling. That was a couple weeks ago. I'll try to do the cool thing where you can like point above and point to it, but I'll probably not figure it out. And this video is going to cover specs regarding normal and heroic dungeons only. What's up, guys? You want to do me a favor and go ahead and fucking subscribe? Huh? Make that red button turn gray for me, please. Thank you. Next one will be about rating specs, and then lastly, the PvP specs. So let's get started. Before we begin, I just want to say that I'm not the tell-all for Warlock specs, all right? We've got a knowledgeable and experienced team over in the Warlock Discord who spend every waking moment trying to min-max, theory craft, and find the best specs that us as Warlocks can do. With that, for much more in-depth talk about these specs and anything Warlock related, please check out the Warlock Discord. Link will be in the description, so let us get started. Before we begin, I guess I should start by saying that these are my opinion on the specs. I feel like in my heart, these specs are the best way that we can choose from. That being said, if you agree or disagree, let's beef it out in the comments, all right? Or better yet, stop by my stream where I stream nothing but TBC Warlock stuff all the damn time. All right, so as for the leveling side of things, as you know, there are many specs Warlocks can choose from when it comes to dungeons, whether that be normal or heroics, all right? Of course, there are specs that are, in my opinion, much better than others, depending on what difficulty you're on, as well as which dungeon you're going to. I'm not going to go dungeon by dungeon on which spec to use because that's a little try-hard. I'm pretty sure you guys are smarter than me and can figure it out. Instead, we'll talk about, at least on the difficulties between normal and heroic, okay? Let's talk about normals first. Straight to the point, brothers. Here's the deal. Normals are a joke on the beta right now, an actual physical joke. Everything dies so fast that it's borderline pointless to even put up dots most of the time, let alone an entire row of dots, making Affliction worthless in my opinion for normals. You'll end up putting up a dot or two, not getting good value out of that dot or two, and spamming Shadow Bolts, so you might as well just be a spec that, well, does more Shadow Bolt damage while needing less dots. And for that, I suggest Felguard, alright? This is the build to be exact. This is a very strong Felguard build for normal dungeons, right? I prefer 1 or 2 points in improved corruption for the less cast time on corruptions while matching the GCD. Whether you put 1 or 2 is completely up to you, and you don't even need to do that if you don't want to. You can also put those 2 points in intensity, or just take your 2 points out of destructive reach and put it into intensity instead, or more points into improved corruption for even less of a cast time on corruptions. However, I would suggest destructive reach, not for the reach as much as for the threat reduction. Simply put, send your Felguard in, toss up a couple corruptions or some immolates, whatever floats your boat. While you might not get 100% value out of tossing them up, you still get 50 to 70% of value on one dot, which is nice still. If not, simply to give the tank more time to build up threat before you start pumping those Shadow Bolts. At this stage of the game, you're more or less a fresh 70 with, maybe not that best of gear that has not too optimal stats. Therefore, your Felguard will carry you hard. He does a massive amount of damage, his threat does not affect yours, and for the most part, your severe lack of skills don't matter to him. He still pumps. Yes, he scales with your skills, but, he'll pump away. Take note that he scales with you. So when you get more stats, he will as well. But even so, at this stage of the game, send him in and let him go crazy. Side note, make sure you ask your party members for group buffs to keep your Felguard buffed up, and also to be sure to get him some scrolls of agi and strength to really get him pumping, and also go ahead and scream at some heals. The next spec that I'm going to suggest is Fire Destro. Yes, I said it. This will be the go-to Fire Destro build for pretty much any content you do in TBC as Fire Destro. You can choose to put the 5 points into Cataclysm rather than Improved Shadow Bolt. However, just a heads up, Cataclysm is kind of actually a pile of absolute trash, especially in dungeons. It's never suggested in any content that you take Cataclysm. I know there's some die-hard Cataclysm fans out there, but, by all means, you do you. If you find yourself literally never having the demonic sacrifice sack a succubus in those dungeons, then feel free. I've been doing Fire Destro countless times, and more often than not, I find a use for Improved Shadow Bolt. There's times you get the AoE, which means in order to maximize your damage on that AoE, you need to swap and sacrifice your succubus for the extra 15% shadow damage on seeds, because once again, Seed of Corruption is a shadow spell, not a fire spell. Now imagine, if you will, an AoE pack. And then right after that AoE pack is a small pack of 1 or 2 mobs. And then after that, another AoE pack, and then another small pack of mobs, and so on and so forth. Rather than you swapping back and forth from your imp to succubus to imp to succubus to imp to succubus between each pack, you can just keep your succubus sacked the entire time during that little section, and Shadow Bolt the small packs until you're back in the clear to keep the imp out for an extended period of time. Therein lies why I suggest ISB. Okay, sorry, I got carried away. Back to the spec. Even without Fire Mage in your party, Fire Destro does so much damn damage. I'm not kidding. Getting carried by the talents. Fire Destro has a higher base damage value than Shadow, and also has higher personal modifiers with Demonic Sacrifice and Ember Storm, because you get 10% from Ember Storm and 50% from sacking your imp. It's just beautiful. More importantly, threat is less of an issue as Fire. The threat per cast of Incinerate is a lot lower than Shadow Bolt, which leaves you at a lower risk of pulling. This spec relies more on your hit than the Felguard build since you don't have the Felguard to carry the lack of stats, but even so, you'll be fine. Obviously, the stipulations of going fire don't matter as much in these measly normal dungeons. However, still be prepared with the flame caps and hopefully your spellfire. I list this spec second because 1, Felguard feels like it's a lot more damage, and 2, a lot of Warlocks don't have spellfire this early. However, I've done countless dungeons as Fire Destro with no Fire Mage and no spellfire, and it was still doing significantly more damage than Affliction and Shadow Destro. You must still be careful with threat here as you do pull less threat than Shadow Destro, but you still pull more threat than Felguard and Affliction. As for Shadow Destro, it's not suggested in normals. Straight to the point. The gameplay of a Shadow Destro Warlock depends heavily on Shadow Bolts, which is not something you want to just be spamming right as you pull due to threat issues. That being said, Shadow Destro is not garbage and it is very viable. You just put up some corruptions and immolates to give your tank some time to gather threat and then start spamming Shadow Bolts while you simply just stare at your threat meter. If you find yourself getting close to pulling out, just swap targets and get to blasting him to alleviate some threat. Now, while threat is a huge thing for us, there's ways to work around it. Obviously, Soul Shatter is huge. However, that's a 5-minute cooldown and you should always make sure you have that up for the boss, regardless of the spec. Another thing to mention is that your tank. What's tanking? Is it a prot pally, where you can easily just start pumping much earlier? Or is it a prot warrior or bear tank? Easy. Just take it easy. When you get to spamming Shadow Bolts or Incinerates, spread them around rather than just on the same target to help spread threat around on other targets. Just be careful if you're with a bear or a prot warrior because sometimes they don't have the threat on, say, all 4 mobs, but only 2 or 3. But yeah, you get it. Let's move on to the real dungeons. Heroics. Unlike normal dungeons, Heroics can actually have some difficulty. Mechanics hit hard and mobs have significant amount of health. And if I'm being honest with you guys, some of these Heroics feel harder than Karazhan did. As a Warlock, this is massive for us, right? Because it allows us to put up more dots that last the proper duration. It's crazy. This makes Affliction actually really good for Heroics, especially when you're starting out in Heroics. Mobs last a lengthy amount of time, and in my personal experience and opinion, this is the best time to run Affliction. Specifically, Unstable Affliction. Guys, Unstable Affliction is so much damn fun, and it is really good, okay? These early Heroics, especially the ones less oriented on AoE, as Affliction, you're able to put up 3 or 4 dots up on mobs at all times, which is absolutely nutty damage. And on top, you just start spamming Shadow Bolts or Seeds as soon as you get the dots rolling. It's crazy. An option for an Affliction build is just to put points into improve Imp and Imp Firebolt. This allows for you Imp to actually pump majorly, actually like huge. So rather than using Dark Pack and phase shifting your Imp, you can let him bang out and he'll show off for you. I absolutely love Affliction, all of the versions of Affliction for Heroics, and even might be not as strong as the Felguard build. In my opinion, much more fun. Please try it at least once. It might be the only time that you'll be able to actually pump this Affliction. Next up, no surprise here, the Felguard build. For the exact same reason as I listed the normal dungeons, except like I said, you can play the spec properly and put corruptions and emos up on all the targets. Spam bolts as your Felguard is just fucking cleaving his way through any dungeon. I'd like to mention as a subjective alternative to the Felguard build I listed before is this build. This time, rather than going down the Destro after Felguard, I chose to go Affliction down to Empowered Corruption. This is an absolutely massive talent that significantly buffs your Corruption's damage. Mix that with the 5-point improved Corruptions, and not only do you have the most powerful dot in the game on your side, but it's instant. Send your Felguard in, put up some dots, and get to spam in bolts. You get more damage out of your Agony with improved Curse and Agony, and threat reduction off your Seeded Corruptions as well with improved Drain Soul. Overall, it's a nice spec. It's a beautiful spec. Side note, yeah, it does kind of suck not to have your Shadow Bolts and Immolates cast fast because it's a slower cast time because you're not putting in Bane. And I'll be completely honest with you guys and say that I have no idea if it's more DPS to put the remaining points into Destro or Affliction in this situation. I just really enjoy the dot play style of in Heroics. My favorite thing about Warlocks, and they really hit hard in Heroics because you get so much value from them. Another excellent option for this Felguard spec is this. This is a good middle ground with half of your remaining points in Affliction, giving you the much needed instant corruption and suppression and some improved life tap. Meanwhile, on the destruction side, the last half of your points will allow your Shadow Bolts to hit harder and faster. It's a win-win in my opinion. For absolute accurate numbers, please make sure to stop by the Warlock Discord where smarter people than me will have a proper answer for all of this. In any matter, Affliction or Destro, it doesn't matter because the fact that you are taking Felguard with this spec makes each of these specs super powerful in Heroics. Lastly,
the Destro specs.
Both Fire and Shadow are in a better place in Heroics than they were in Normals. Both specs can keep up multiple dots before they start spamming Shadow Bolts or Incinerates. By now, your group in general has better gear, and you're able to put dots up that last, and the group also has more gear, making threat not as large of an issue. Now, whether you pick up Fire or Shadow Destro is completely up to you and your playstyle. I will once again suggest Fire Destro over Shadow Destro for the exact same reasons as Normals. It's more damage than Shadow. It's less threat issues, and let's be real, Fire looks cooler than Shadow. Yeah, it's not really a reason to pick it, but it's just a little caveat here. Now, get lucky enough to find a Fire Mage in your group, and you'll be sitting comfortably on top of everybody else. A little note before we end this. I've done all the normals and heroics in TBC multiple times, and I've personally tried each of these specs I've listed multiple times. Each one is a warlock you can expect the top meters as, guys. Okay, that's how powerful warlocks are in TBC. The difference of most of these specs were minimal. Pick one, pick them all, pick whatever, but I urge you to try out all these specs and see for yourself, okay? Whichever you prefer. Don't be afraid of the damage, because as I've said, they all pump, each and every one of them. Well, guys, I think it's good for the day. Today's pre-patch for TBC. All right, my guys, so let's go ahead and pump a little bit, man. I'm gonna hurry up with this, guys, okay? Like I said, this is a subjective and what I believe in my heart to be the best of the specs, but also what I prefer. I'll be back up in a couple days, and I'll go over the suggested specs for T4 raids, and then we'll do PvP specs. Until then, much love, my Warlock family. Peace.